Hi, and welcome to today's feedback session for Videographer of the Year. Just a couple of notes as we kind of get things started. I've heard that we introduce the judges in the beginning, but we don't come back to their names and who they are, so we're going to be doing that throughout this particular feedback session. Another thing I wanted to let everyone know is we have Chief Warrant Officer Runyon here. He is one of 5 military judges that judged on the panel, on the individual panels this year. So we did have a military rep from each of the services. Also, I know you guys are on pins and needles, but the winners will not be announced until tomorrow. So even our judges don't know who's won. So let's go ahead and meet our judges. Sir?
Hey, I'm Chief Warrant Officer 4, Clint Runyon. I'm currently stationed at 2MEF in North Carolina at Camp Lejeune. 20 plus years of combat camera work, and now a visual information officer in the new Marine Corps ComStrat occupational field.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And hi everybody, my name is Claudia Barbiero and I'm not in the military, but I've been in marketing utilizing video for a long time, back in the dark ages. But right now I'm actually involved working with live broadcasting and live video production with the company I work with. So we work with major broadcasters around the globe, regional sports networks, and even online streamers who stream their life real time on social media. So I'm involved in all different types of, if you want to think about it, today's multimedia journalist. So we help both technically them to produce their content, but also communicate, share, and get discovered by audiences around the globe.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. Again, these videos are running in no particular order in case you think that maybe the one off the top might be the winner or the one at the end might be the winner. So these are going in no particular order. We're going to go ahead and play the video first, and then we will come back for judges' comments. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, it looks like we're having a technical difficulty or two, so we'll take a couple of minutes. What did you guys think about the contest as a whole, the stuff you were looking at?
Well, I was honored to be asked to do it because it is exciting to be able to provide feedback to the next generation of videographers that are coming up, especially in today's day and age where things are very short, very much infographics, very much the attention span of an audience is very difficult to capture. So it was really interesting to see how the next generation of videographers in the military are actually embracing that to say there's so much to share video-wise, and how do you look at it from how do I edit that down and distill it to tell a really interesting story. So it was fun. So I thank you.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. I enjoyed it. Looking across the force, looking at the entire DoD and how the DoD perceives production and what they see in videography, I think is really cool. So it was a treat to look at what they're doing.
Excellent. Well, let's take a look at what they're doing now.
All right.
Okay. So, taking a look at that, sir, what'd you think?
I liked it. I thought that it was a very good informational piece. He used a lot of historical footage. So pulling in a lot of historical imagery is extremely important, especially when you're talking about a subject like this in this video, when you're describing a metal or something like that to an audience that really may not know the background of what that metal is or what that information is. So I think that his use of historical footage was really good. Transition-wise, some of the concerns I had were how fast some of the transitions were in pacing with how he paced it. But otherwise, I enjoyed it.
I agree. For me, as a visual marketer, being able to read all the text and being able to absorb what's being conveyed is super important. And that would be my only real criticism about the piece, is maybe the pace, the size of the font, the amount of content, sometimes breaking things up. It's okay to have it move a little bit at a pace that you actually watch it from the standpoint of someone watching it and reading it while also trying to see the images behind it and get that relationship. And that's really the only critique that I can offer. A couple of those content areas were difficult to read and see what's going on.
So this is where sometimes you can maybe get a little too close
Correct.
to your product,
Right.
and that's the benefit of multiple eyes, kind of letting you know that.
Yeah, that does happen during the editing process. Watching, rewatching, getting the input of others. You're absolutely right. If I were to write it, I'm probably going to throw so much in there because I'm so passionate about it, versus someone else who can say, we can break this down in maybe real impactful keywords. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you both. Okay, we're going to move on to our next video. Let's see what we've got.
History provides us with so many valuable things. It's important to me because it's part of who I am as a sailor and who I am as a person. I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have the lessons from history and the legacy that was left behind by the chiefs that came before me and the sailors that came before me.
History is important to me and to us because it helps to shorten the gap between different branches, different services, what we have done here in the military, in the Navy, and where we have come from, and what it took to get us to the point that we are here today.
We talk about the keepers of tradition, and this is where everything started. This is that tying the line of what it is that we do now coming from what it is that we did back then and how we evolved and became better and where we came from.
History is important to me because where we came from, it kind of guides where we're going. And if we don't learn from those before us, then we can't teach those that are coming after us the proper direction to go in.
Well, history is important to me because you have to know where you came from in order to know where you're going. So doing Chiefs Heritage Week here on the Constitution, it means a lot. We're on the oldest ship in the Navy, and what better place to celebrate Chiefs Heritage Week but here.
I guess me being here physically just pretty much bring me back to see what the olden day sailors went through, to sleep in the bunk, to experience what how they live, how they slept. Yeah, it's pretty much brings a whole new meaning, pretty much a living history when you're on the Constitution.
What history means to me is the Chiefs Mess has been around for 125 years and has probably been the most relevant aspect of the Navy to ensuring that we meet the mission. So in respecting and honoring our traditions and history of heritage as an organization ensures that we remain relevant to the Navy for years to come.
Try to be polite about this.
No.
Start with
So let's go ahead and let's talk about this one a little bit. I'm a broadcaster by trade as well. I'm an Army broadcaster to start with, civilian stuff as well. So in looking at this piece, what jumped out at you?
There's a couple things that jumped out at me in this piece. One that I really struggled with, the hard cutting in between interviews. The interviewees were not lit, so you had the the boat in the background, which was probably more in focus than the
History
subjects were.
provides us with so many
And
valuable
that
things.
causes a
It's
rift
important
for
to
the
me
viewer.
because it's part
So
of
I have
who I am as a
that was tough
sailor
for me to
and
watch
who I
this
am as
piece
a
because I was
person.
trying to focus
I
on the
wouldn't
viewer,
be
but
where I am
the ship
today
was
if
really
I
what was
didn't
in
have the
focus, and there was no
lessons of
lighting on the
history
subject.
and the
So that
legacy
causes
that was left
a real
behind by the
distraction.
chief
That's one of the
that
key
came
things that I
before me,
started with.
and the sailors that
Claudia?
Totally agree. And in addition to that, having it be the same shot over and over again gets a little, I don't want to say exhausting for the viewer, but you start to tune things out. You don't really recognize it's a new voice, it's a new story that's being said. You almost zone out a little bit because it all looks the same. So sometimes just shifting a little bit, having a nice transition between each speaker, and just shifting it a little bit can then keep the viewer awake enough to stay engaged.
Agreed.
I'm looking at this as well, and I am a little surprised that the interview subject would be in the same place all the time, and I completely agree with you with how it was lit.
Look, the exciting thing about being outside is that you have the whole outside as your studio, right? So even though the story is about what's happened, I guess, with them visiting the ship, take advantage of the fact that you got the whole ship, and it's okay to move. It's okay to try something different, and get enough footage then when you come back to have editing options.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on to our next video.
How they live, how
The gun that you see behind me is a 14-inch battleship gun from World War I that is mounted on a train. It's known as the U.S. Navy railroad gun. So the whole reason why this gun was built in the first place was the Germans had, at that time, railroad guns that could fire well behind the lines of the Allies. And when the Americans joined the war, the Allies put in a request to the Americans to see if we had anything that could really hit behind the German lines. The reason why the Navy built it was, well, at that time, who had the biggest guns but the Navy? So they attached a big battleship gun to this train carriage and were able to hit well beyond the German lines, hitting railroad depots and troop assembly points, really breaking up several German attacks. The gun was designed right here in the Washington Navy Yard, which at the time was known as the U.S. Naval Gun Factory. From its first design to when it first fired in France was only 230 days, which is a very, very quick turnaround time considering the manufacturing process and the transport and training of all of the crews who manned these guns. All of these guns were manned by U.S. Navy personnel. So the guns that you see behind me, they are a 14-inch battleship gun, meaning the shells are 14 inches in diameter. These guns can fire those shells 42,000 yards, which is well behind German lines. The effects of these shells were devastating, hitting railroad depots and troop assembly points, really breaking up several German attacks. They were also some of the last guns that fired on the very last day of the war on November 11, 1918. The reason why the history of this gun and the stories of those sailors are important today is because we have sailors with boots on the ground, not just on ships, working those specialized jobs. Not only are they doing that today, but they're also doing that 100 years ago during World War I.
All right, guys, so let's talk about this one. What do we think?
So I'll start. I mean, I think it's a fantastic journalistic report. You know, this is something you could see as a great segment on the local news station. The problem was with the final production, it was produced like a motivational video. You know, so the use of audio, the sound, competed with the great narrator that you had, the great interview that you were doing.
Now, that just played.
Yeah.
I want to let everyone know that that was actually a transition in the piece. It wasn't something that
fact, yeah.
that just is sort of flashing on your screen.
And I think that's just it. The use of those types of techniques are good for a different style or type of finished product. So sort of knowing what your finished product is supposed to be helps you focus in the editing process. A lot of those things weren't needed because it's a killer story. It's very well written and it's very well narrated, and I think we were discussing there's some fantastic footage in this too, right? You know, so I'm going to let you finish.
I just really enjoyed the historical footage.
Yeah.
The ability to dive in and deep dive into get all this footage together was amazing, because he has just such an amazing process that I guarantee most people just have never even heard of this. So that was phenomenal. But again, I really struggled with kind of the glitchiness in the beginning that was kind of built in, and then not lighting the subject. The separation of having him in front of the gun was great, where his composition, but I really struggled with the subject not being lit to bring him off of that cannon to really drive that home, and the audio was a struggle.
Yeah.
I think when we get into our headphones at times and we're editing and we're jamming, audio kind of comes tail end. And if you don't spend the time to properly work your levels and modulate your audio, you have this really harsh competing. When it goes to broadcast and you watch it live, then you realize stuff starts really competing, and it's hard to get the message across.
So I guess the advice here would be you've got to take the cans off and listen to it in real time to be able to hear that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, let's move on to our next video.
What we are doing today is actually pouring out the concretion that is embedded into the floor. It's been over 200 years of buildup of sand, sediment, and corrosion, just almost like cement. And so what I'm having to do is actually use an auger and taking a drill and trying to slowly drill through that really tough concretion. So concretion is sort of the build-up over time of sand, sediment, and corrosion product, mainly iron, that sort of over time it just cements all together. The longer it sits there and does that, the harder it gets. So this has been over 200 years worth of build-up. It's almost like concrete. What I'll do is continue on with the same process, but if you look inside, you can actually, hopefully you can see the progress. And I'll continue that until it is completely deconcreted. And then we'll go on to the next stage of finishing desalination and then stabilization.
Okay. Want to jump in?
Sure. Again, this is a really, really cool subject matter. Restoring these cannons and seeing some of this incredible history stuff. So it really pulled me in initially when I started watching it, but I just really struggled with this piece. At the end, it just kind of died off at the end. We didn't know what happened with the cannon. There was no closure as to where we went with it. Having your subject spend half the time talking with a mask on and a mask off really puts an audience off. It really, it's just very hard to listen to somebody talk when they have something physically over their mouth.
Exactly. No, again, we seem to agree, but it's basic principles. There's an opportunity to get a lot of the interview content and then be able to cut that in to the action, because the action is visually interesting, sucks you in. So it's just sort of learning that balance, that it doesn't all, if she's saying something great, take a pause, take the mask off, have her repeat it, so it really looks like an interview portion that you're blending and editing into the actual action version. But yeah, I'm still left wondering. I want to know what happens.
Yeah,
that's the not necessarily in a cliffhanger good way. It's in a way of like, wait, okay, and it's a pause. So having a little closure to the piece would be helpful. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, let's take a look at our next piece. Unfortunately, the sound was down here in the studio, so let's go ahead and take a look at that again.
Yeah,
real quick.
sure.
Yeah. I think I just threw them for I'm sorry.
Well, it's important for the people who are watching on the stream to hear it, because I do remember this piece, and there was actually a good use of audio with it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Is the video hot?
It looks it. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about what we just saw. I mean, this is kind of up your realm. I don't know how many times you've had an opportunity to attend a training like that.
I'm interested in your
Never.
thoughts.
So it was fun, because you see that kind of activity in movies, but it was fun to see it from a training exercise perspective. So let's put it this way: from an informational video that got me excited about the type of activity that our military is doing to be prepared, it worked, which I would think was the intent. There was a very clear intent, which was, this is exciting, it's hard work, but it was done in a really pithy, right in your face, this is where it's going. But there was some great effects. There's good balance of, let's say, the special effects that we can sometimes get a little carried away with. So, but it was done well. The mix between slow motion and some of the editing was I wasn't expecting it. So it's good camera work. It's a good blend of different types of footage and pulled together. And yeah, I walked away feeling like, wow, that looks awesome. Which is all you can help from a video, right? At the end of the day, is that the audience goes, oh, I get it, and that was awesome. Or whatever emotion you wanted to elicit. So.
Yeah. Well, for me, I've seen a lot of this type of work. So I would say that I'm a little more judgmental when I see this kind of stuff, in a good way. I think that the way that this was produced was very overt on purpose, and I love that. The use of slow motion to kind of dramatize what they're doing really, really helps the message. I think I agree to your point. You know, you hit in the face and you're like, yeah, you know, I'm like, this is awesome. Very worked on. This video is filtered. It is tuned. It is cut. It is chopped, and that's great. But sometimes it can be overdone. I like the use of quadcopter. I think that the use of quadcopter is extremely subtle. I think most people wouldn't have even recognized it was in there. As soon as I saw it, I could put my finger on it because of the kind of shot that it was. And I think it was an incredible use because it was seamless. You'd have to know what you were looking for to pick that out of the crowd. The one thing I will say, this thing came in like a lion and it kind of went out like a lamb. So the ending of just having people just kind of running away, like running through, and then I know very well in a Marine mind, it's like, hey, you finish and you push through. That's a very Marine Corps thing to do, but in this case, it's a production, and we needed it to finish as strong as it actually started.
So your advice, I mean, because you've shot these things before, many times, and it's hard because there's some repeat action that goes on, but to really capture what it feels like to be here is a little more difficult. So do you have any advice for anyone who's kind of like going out there and everything's happening like this?
Yeah, so like any of these things, when you're doing this kind of work, the pre-production, even in a mount facility in urban terrain, the pre-production, if you're going to film it and produce it, you have to do your pre-production. You have to know what you're going into, because when you start filming in that environment, all bets are off. It gets so busy and it gets so out of control. You're working with controllers, you're trying to be in the right place, you're trying to not get in people's way but still be in front of the action. And that can take a videographer and suck them so far in that they just lose context. And I don't think that this cinematographer lost context. I think that they did extremely well, but pre-production guides and rules in this environment, and closing, a strong closer, you have to script that. You have to plan for something if you're going to produce at this level, and especially in non-narrative, right? So we did this massive non-narrative, and we all said, like, whoa, like this is telling me, well, I'm evoking emotion out of this, but it's a non-narrative, so you've got to put the stamp on the end of it.
Yeah. Didn't we always say, back in my days of Dinfo's broadcasting, that your strongest shot is your end shot?
Is your last shot, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's something to kind of keep in mind when you're out there. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at our next video.
The role of an NCO is important because that is the first level of teacher that a junior Marine has. NCOs train their Marines to win our nation's battles through rigorous, challenging training, challenging them and as well as teaching them. So every time that they get challenged, they also learn something. Teaching, coaching, and mentoring to me is everything that there is about instructing a Marine. You want to teach them how to do something, and then when they attempt it for the first time, you want to coach them on how they're doing it, and once they've accomplished the task, you mentor them and show them, hey, this may work better, this is what you did good, this is what you did bad. NCOs make their Marines more lethal through practicing violence of action on a daily basis. Working your Marines to be aggressive and intelligent and physically fit is the easiest way to make your Marines more lethal.
It's interesting.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Are we hot?
yeah.
Oh, we are? Okay.
Yeah. Oh.
There we
So anyway, we talk about the video as it's going along. So just so you know, we're playing along here as you play along at home.
Right.
Okay, guys, what did you think?
I just said wow at the end because it was the similar feeling, which is there is this great open, and we were talking about all the complimentary things about the techniques used and all of it, but the close, it just ends. And it's a great story. I'm sucked in. There's so much I love about this videographer themselves, because I can tell their style, and you can instantly know that it was the same videographer as the one that we just saw. And there's some good things, but there's a couple big distractions, and some of it is during the interview process, but then definitely the end. It's an abrupt, that's it. You're just flat, and it almost destroys all this great stuff that we were admiring.
Right.
You know.
Right. I same thing. I absolutely love the imagery. The quality. So one of the things that I want to note is you have to have the right equipment, and you can tell that the equipment being used to shoot this was very high-end gear. You cannot shoot like this without having the right equipment. So it's very obvious that the videographer was using the right gear to produce this. The panning shots, these moving shots where you're walking and it's steady with the gimbal. It's very obvious to see that. The use of nat sound in certain places was amazing. You'd hear a boom, you'd see it, and then the biggest problem that I had was I love hearing that underlying nat sound. But then other times where somebody was going to kick in a door or something was going to explode, there was no nat sound behind it, and I was just begging for it. I was like, oh, this is the time. Let me hear the boom or whatever. But I thought it was well done. But again, I think that pre-production reigns in these environments, and if you don't script a good close, if you don't think about and you don't plan for a good close, you don't get it. And this had all the makings for a non-narrative. It had all of this great stuff going on. And then we went out.
It's not enough just to use the video bumper at the end. I mean, that's great for identification. It's not the close to your piece.
Right.
You know,
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that I'll finish with this. The interview, I struggled with.
Yeah.
I struggled with the interview because it was very difficult to actually get what he was trying to deliver.
Yeah.
Did the shots work for you?
It was almost. Well, look, I appreciate that someone was looking at producing those, and I think they was thought out what those camera angles were. Unfortunately, they just didn't necessarily work for me. You know, I think some of the artistic, and sometimes you can go a little crazy with that. So it's okay to take a step back and just take a look at that shot again, set it up again, and maybe even get several more camera angles so that in the editing afterwards, you can assess your on-site judgments a little bit and go, well, maybe that artistic thought of, you know, the side pan, maybe I don't want to have the entire conversation be that, because it's just not appropriate for what I was watching right here, right now. Yeah. You know, anyway, I don't know what your thoughts were.
But overall, I think it was. You know, we're being hyper.
I was about to say we're being very critical or nitpicking, and I don't know why, because it is. Maybe it is because it's such a great piece, and you're right. It's a good use of technology, but with an artistic eye, and so it's almost disappointing that when we fall flat in those little things. You know?
Well, I mean, like, look, we're talking about videographer of the year. So like that's the deal. Like it's
all right, you made me feel better now.
It's the videographer of the year, the whole year for the whole Department of Defense. So I'm okay. Like let's do this.
Yes, and
thank you.
But the important thing is the points that you guys are bringing out. It's not just talking about here's what's wrong with it. We're offering some ways that it could have been fixed. So don't worry about that. Again, if you are just joining us, in the studio with me is Claudia Barbiero. Can never get that out quite quick.
Yes. But it's a lot of vowels.
And Chief Warrant Officer for Runyon. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our next video.
We were the Air Assault Task Force, so we were inserted via 53, and then we were ordered to seize an objective.
Went from there to support by fire position to support maneuver, and then the attack initiated with indirect fires. my fire tonight, we're going to be having a mechanized unit coming against us. So we've established a defense. We're going to be having rockets going off next to us with the AT-4s.
And 2 actual, you are approved
I don't know, guys. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. What'd you think?
Well, once again, I love it. I love the footage. We were just, a little bit about some of the night camera work. Yeah. Visually, it's some of the more beautiful video we've seen throughout the whole competition and all the entries. And again, minor little things that sometimes maybe what we're even talking about in terms of like the interview portion of it isn't typically or traditionally the person behind the video camera's job. There was, back in the day, you had a whole crew of people. When it's just you do wear a bunch of different hats. And sometimes it can be difficult to say, oh no, I also have to step in front and go, maybe we should ask him to remove the glasses. Maybe someone's not comfortable yet. And I'm gonna also, help them be relaxed. There's things that you now have to do all yourself. So the things that we're noticing is because, if I'd been there, I would have done this. We have to remember this is one person producing from start to finish, capturing all the content. I mean, beautiful, beautiful shots that make you feel like you are right there. Great editing, good use of sound. So it's like nitpicking things. Oh, if I had done that, I may have asked him to take his hat off, or I may have, try to move it a little bit over here. So I mean, I don't know what you have to say, but it's nitpicking,
Yeah, I mean, from the Marine side of the house, like we've seen it a million times. Every corporal that's ever told to do an interview sits there and says yes, no, but. You've got to get that guy to take his boonie cover off, to take his glasses off, to go under a cover instead of being out in the broad daylight like that, which is just burning through this video. Shooting in the desert is insanely hard.
Yeah.
You have to have all of your filters. You have to have, you're in ND overdrive, like trying to kill all of that extra light.
Oh, right, yeah.
Your neutral density filters are just critical, and in that environment, you're doing it times like 10. Technically, from a technical standpoint, to properly expose in that open environment, and I have shot in that environment for years and years and years, it is incredibly hard to expose out there and get well exposed shot work. And I think that the videographer did that. Yeah. I think that she did get well exposed shot work. It is filtered, it's heavily filtered, and the interview was tough. You could tell the corporal wasn't super into sitting there talking about it, but I think in the grand scheme of things that she put a lot of work into producing this, and some of the stuff like her impact zone, getting the actual impacts, and some of the aircraft stuff really added.
I will say that this is my third year hosting this feedback session, and the one thing I hear resounding from each year is you have all this amazing B-roll, but then your interview shot is very stagnant.
Yeah.
If you had to offer a little bit of advice, knowing of course the harsh environment, you're working on your own, how could that interview shot have been made? Well, other than getting the corporal to have some energy, how could that shot have been done differently that would have been in keeping maybe with the B-roll as well as the movement and pentameter of that piece? Any advice?
Yeah, I don't know if you want to hear what I have to say, but I don't know what the rules and regulations are. I don't know what the instruction was for the piece and what the need was. But that's a hard decision that I would make to say, cut it all together and use a different method of communicating it. If you're in a situation where the subject just, is not good on camera, it's okay to say, I can't use it. The other is in this case, it was a beautiful setting. These are some things that maybe just weren't noticed. Visually, it was okay, and it's nice to have that break to see a face that's speaking, but in some cases, again, depending on the piece and how long it is, it's okay to not cut to the face shot and just use the voiceover, fix it in post and get someone else to repeat what he said, or get him to re-record it later on. That's another thing. Sometimes people say great stuff in the environment, but the audio's bad or the lighting's bad. You can have them re-record it later. That's the benefit of not doing it live, is that you have that opportunity. So those are just a couple of ideas.
Now, sometimes those opportunities for us come when you're out in the field. It's like you've got it now, you've got it for 15 minutes. So that may not be your option.
Yeah.
But those are some good ideas, even if you have that dry, somebody told me to be here, this is my place of duty, ask your questions. So that comes down to interviewing techniques as well. And sometimes that gets lost, I think. Not here per se, but just in general when I'm watching pieces that we've produced.
Yeah.
So
I think that in a situation like this, like these uncontrolled, these uncontrolled environments, like you got to shoot the interview. Like you got to get the soundbite. You have to. You can always come full circle. You can always get him at dusk when everybody has calmed down. It's not as weird or intense or whatever. You can shoot it afterwards. But I think that the smart thing, what a lot of these folks are doing, is they're at least getting a soundbite from somebody. Yep. The kind of as we were talking about before, interviews are a tough deal in our world, and we need, as a whole, as the DoD, as cinematographers and videographers, we need to do better at how we shoot and produce our interviews.
Well, I think it comes back again. You're not just a multimedia journalist. You're not just the videographer. You're not just the sound engineer. As we move forward in this industry, it is coming down to everybody doing it themselves. So learning those skills, how to ask questions, how to elicit that response that you're looking for, not being afraid to be the interviewer, not just the person behind the camera. That's a lot. It's asking a lot, but it all helps your finished product at the end. At the end of the day, you're the producer. This is your work. So it's okay to learn every aspect of that craft, even trying to get a stone to blossom in front of the camera.
Stones and blossoms, okay.
I will say I didn't mind it that much in this piece. I thought he was, I don't know, for me, again, because I'm a little bit more objective because I'm on the outside, I expect a guy in that environment to be a little, yeah. You know what I mean? Like that was okay to me.
Excellent. Okay, let's move on to our next piece. So, as we're sort of talking here in the studio a little bit about what we're watching, it's some interesting observations that you guys have had.
Yeah, this piece is, look, this is a B-roll package, right? So there's a lot of stuff in here where you're just seeing just raw cut work, and that's totally fine. We have produced gazillions of B-roll packages, and I think that this is incredibly important because we're preserving the larger chunk of unedited imagery. This is really what the archive, the National Archives up at NARA, this is what they actually need for future work. But in saying that, like, we've got to do our work. We've got to do our cleanup work. There's a lot of slow-mo in this that is put into a B-roll package, which is, I'm not saying it's not okay, but it's not usual to do effect work on a B-roll package for preservation. But then we have audio that kicks in, and then audio that vanishes when we go to slow-mo. So we go from this over-peaking hot audio to just dead zone, and we just ping-pong kind of back and forth. So it's kind of hard in a raw form to view it that way. But the imagery is beautiful. There's some reveals, there's great helicopter. Obviously, everybody wants to see MV-22 Osprey imagery today. Absolutely. Like that's kind of what's going on. So it's great to see that. But yeah, there's some technical stuff.
Yeah, so I look at it as if I was editing a piece for the evening news. And I would be completely excited to have this footage, but you hit the nail on the head. I would never be able to use a slow motion graphics, not for, let's say, a news segment. If I was doing a larger piece, being able to have this, great, but I would prefer to choose those effects or not.
Right.
And the natural ambient sound is important to have because you never know when I might need that. You know, I look at it as getting a B-roll package. Let's say you were doing a video news release to announce the latest and greatest. I'm the local news station. I need all of that. But with that said, there's beautiful footage here that I would be completely excited to have to work with. So, yeah.
And I think this goes back to like an inherent concern that we have across the DoD, and that is, what are the standards for us producing B-roll packages for permanent preservation? In other words, this package has amazing imagery, but then there's slow-mo work on it. Okay, we've killed the audio out of those segments. Well, I needed that. I need that preserved. And then the other thing that I have with, and I saw this kind of as a theme that I've noticed throughout a lot of these B-roll, there are absolutely no sound bites in any of them. There is just segments of footage. So there's no accompanying interview, even sound bites, to accompany what we're seeing in footage. So unless you have like amazing metadata, you've got no reference point off of, and if I'm building packages off of this B-roll, which is what we do a lot of, if I'm building something off of this B-roll, I need that other person. I need somebody saying something, giving me a bite somewhere.
And that's some of the stuff that we've had happen in contests in the past was really explaining what that B-roll package is. It's prime cuts, and then bumped up against that is your interview. All right, 2 or 3 sound bites from that interview, so that if I pick it up, I can do a story.
Right.
So that's the purpose of these B-roll packages. So that's a great observation. Yeah. All right, what are we looking at now?
Good one. Going in. Accepted this time.
Right.
So, how did this work for you guys?
I'll dive in. And this was, I think I mentioned it earlier. The worst thing you can do is make me read your video. Video is impactful because there's things happening in my ears, there's things happening in my eyes, and I really can walk away with an emotional sense of what's happening. If the purpose of the video is to educate me, it needs to be in chunks that I can read quickly, digest, understand what's happening. This was way too much. It does look like a social media piece. It looks like it was made for maybe Instagram, or it's got that kind of feel. But in that respect, then it would be a fail in my book anyway, because from that standpoint, it can be short, it can be bold, with a great visual image to convey what's happening, but then just tell it to me and tell it to me quick. Don't make me. There's no way you could even read that. In time before the next screen came up. So and it makes me unfortunate because I actually want to know, what am I watching?
Right. No, I agree. I think that one moves, and I get it. It is very obviously a social media piece. It's a quick burst, but it's so quick, and there's so much written information in that piece that unless you are a viewer that is willing to pause something, you're not going to catch it. And I think that that pararescue stuff, what they're depicting, again, incredibly important. Yeah. Important for the public to understand and to see that. The drum I've been banging on is pre-production, man. Like you gotta plan some of this stuff out, because you've only got so many seconds to get a message across.
Correct.
And man, it's got to hit. So I think that they tried to get after it, but I think we kind of missed in getting the message.
Okay, let's take a look at our next video.
Yeah.
Rescue is like having one massive family. I mean, I grew up with 2 older brothers, and now it's just like I have a lot of older brothers. It's really, really close-knit. The mission kind of brings us all together. So it's really not a big deal being a female in a male-dominated career field. I mean, especially out here, we have a female squadron commander who at any time could tell me to execute the mission and then be launched out on that mission by a female crew chief. So that's pretty cool. There's no gender in the aircraft. Getting to go out and fly every day in itself is amazing. And then you pile the mission on top of that, the That Others May Live concept. It's incredible. To any young females looking to join the military, go into combat roles, be a pilot, you're going to have people along the way that are going to tell you you can't do something. The important thing to remember is not to listen to that, especially not to let yourself tell you that you can't do that. If you have a goal or a dream that you want to accomplish, you can do it as long as you put your mind to it.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about this, guys. What do you think?
I think it was a well-produced piece. From a one-on-one interview perspective, it tells a story rather than just being a boring one-on-one interview. Like there's some good emotion that's evoked through all the footage that's used and how it's edited together. And with that said, I'm sure there's some nitpicky things that can come out of it, but at the end of the day, I heard her story, I remember her story, and it was done in a beautiful way. But again, with some minor tweaks.
Okay, well, let's talk about those minor tweaks. What do we think those might be?
I agree. Claudia nailed it. There's some amazing cut work in this. It was produced well. You can tell that the videographer put a large amount of time into producing this piece and trying to complete a thought. There is a good interview, but the interviewer sitting open-legged on a helicopter is a tough visual. I think that the most professional way to put it is the videographer needs to be cognizant of how their subject is postured. I think that's the best term.
That's the
best way to say
it.
Posture is important because at the end of the day, nobody cares what the videographer had to do to get the shot.
Right.
All they care about is what they see on that screen. Used to be 4:3 and now 16:9. They don't care. And if it comes off awkwardly, then that's how it comes off. So I think that the interviewee sitting on that aircraft and going to that wide shot was a little awkward.
And they trust you, right? They're in your hands.
Right.
So they're not thinking, how do I look? And in fact, you don't want them thinking, what do I look like? Because you want them to be real. And that's what was happening here. She was very real and honest. So you owe that to your subject to take a look and help them out a little bit.
Agreed. But I do think it was incredibly well edited.
They thought about the story that they were telling and made sure they had enough to go along with that whole story. Again, the tiny little thing though, end that story though too.
Yes. Yeah, I agree 100%.
But otherwise, it's nicely done, you know.
Yeah, I really wish they would have put the bow tie. The shot at the end is a sped up motion shot of her getting into the cockpit, and it's a wonderful shot. I just wish it wasn't the last shot. It needed, again, like many of the videos that we've looked at, it needed a closer to put the bow tie on this thing and to close it off. I love the detail work.
Yeah.
I loved the extreme close-ups of the name and the name tags and that cut work, that detail. That takes a lot of thought, and it was very well done. So
excellent. All right, well, let's take a look at our next piece.
So with this one, make sure you guys fly 2 different valves. Okay. So
Okay, so tanker refueling. What'd you think?
Well, I thought it was nicely done. The portion of the refueling was very nice. The real struggle that I had, again, this is a B-roll package, and it needed to be completed. There's a lot of B-roll, just random B-roll on the front end, not sequenced. We've got to have sequences. We just desperately need even 2-shot. I'll even take a 2-shot sequence, but give me that 3-shot sequence for the editor to work with. But good B-roll, but fairly incomplete.
Yeah.
Not much on the front end, just some random shots. And then when we get to the obligatory refuel, the refuel is beautiful. All of us sat here and said, hey, we would edit with that. Like I would cut that. But then we just kind of, again, we get a couple shots of landing. There's absolutely no soundbite to accompany any of this. And for me, one of the toughest things I have is the audio is just all over. So that was like my main. Yeah,
it's exactly what I was thinking when outside of the actual refueling time period, I don't know what I would use out of the rest of that. So that's not a great sign when it's saying, like, if I got this B-roll package to actually do something with it. I'd be like, oh, I have some great moments, but I don't have a story. So I think the word was, the B-roll is not, do the work. B-roll is not just setting up a camera and recording what's happening. It's going in and finding that shot or two about what's happening. It's the about what's happening, which is difficult, especially with something that probably happens every day, and it's like, okay, the plane taking off, but it's a chance to think a little bit differently or look a little bit differently at the surroundings, to give an editor something to work with. Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look at our next piece.
I did love the A10 peeling off, by the way. That was great.
As pararescue men here at Bagram, the primary job is to save lives. Inevitably, people have a bad day in war, and it's these guys' job to, at any time of the day, any environment, to go in there and save people's lives. This is the first time that we've had a joint Air Force and Army combat search and rescue in Afghanistan. For those that are flying missions every day, they can rest a little easier, or they can fight harder, knowing that they have a group of highly motivated guys back here that will risk themselves to go get them. In this particular area of operations in Bagram, the CH-47, or the Army Chinook, is the best platform to conduct this mission.
All aircrew members take as a solemn vow that if you go down, there will be assets that will come and get you. And that's a pararescueman vow. That's something that we've taken on, and we take that vow very seriously. The benefit of having the Chinook integrated into the rescue squadron with the pararescuemen over other airframes is the space and the power available in the high altitude areas of Afghanistan.
Here at Bagram, we're surrounded by 12 to 13,000 foot snowy mountains, which aircraft have to fly over or through every single day to operate in and out of Afghanistan.
If somebody's up in the mountains and they need to be hoisted out of the mountains because there isn't a suitable landing zone, their aircraft has the power to actually hold a stable hover. A lot of aircraft can't do that.
With the Chinook having as much power as it does, it allows us to reach very high altitudes without the degradation of the power margin that most other tail rotor aircraft experience as you go up in higher altitudes.
So mass casualty operations is an inherent risk that takes place within Afghanistan. What's nice about the 47 is I can pick most of those folks up all in one trip.
By being able to load multiple patients on one aircraft, much more than most aircraft, out of a firefight, and get them to the care that's required is literally life or death for a lot of people.
Give me patient 2. What is it? GSW where?
Empty your chest.
Okay.
Single entry.
We can fill the entire aircraft without it ever reaching its weight limitations. The space that a 47 allows us gives the PJ more room to operate around the patient to give better care.
From time of injury to time on that cold steel, on that OR table, we try to get that within an hour, and the easiest way to do that is move as many people as possible at one time.
Yeah, as long as anybody is on the ground and aircraft are flying overhead, rescue is needed within Afghanistan, period.
You can put more pararescuemen inside the aircraft. You can render better aid. We can carry everything that they need to carry to the battlefield, and that's not an issue for the CH-47.
The Chinook's easily capable for what we're doing here. The ability to load patients, the ability to pull the power that we need. There's a lot of capabilities that the Chinook brings to the fight.
At the tactical level, the PJs and the Army work seamlessly together. It's as we've been doing this for years. We need that aircraft to get to places that we couldn't reach before. And the 47 and the relationship with the Army and the Air Force allows that to happen.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
This was beautifully complete. This was I think I said this was like a mini movie, yet it's something that I could see turned into a 30-second, a 1 minute, you know, it has so much in it that it can be used multiple ways, which to me is always the sign of great content. But as a whole, from start to finish, telling a message, being very clear about that, doing it in a moving way, and then taking a step back and looking at all the elements that went into creating it that way. It was done with beautiful shots, personalized shots, not just action, beautiful interviews that you could hear clearly, that were lit, that actually made me want to watch a talking head, which isn't always easy to do, as we've seen in a couple other pieces. This was a beautiful, beautiful piece to get to watch. So.
Can I ask a question? We've talked about endings before. What did you think of the ending? Did that bring it home? Was that the punch that you've been talking about?
Well, yes, for two reasons. One, the narrative ended. There was a natural end to the interview, so I felt like the story was complete. So it doesn't always have to be this big bang shebang, like, hey, we're ending now. The narrative ended, and the visuals joined with that. But then having a closing credit definitely helps the viewer sum it up. I love seeing everyone's names at the end of who is in the piece.
Those were people who we lost. Yeah.
And I think it helped drive home the value,
right,
which was the message of what they're doing, how important their equipment is, how dangerous the environment is, how thoughtful they are about their training and preparedness. I mean, I got all of it, you know, and you remember it all. It was, you know, as a marketer, that's important. You know, someone in PR and advertising, all of that, you know, you want people to remember your message. But you also, if you're a storyteller, it's the same thing. You want people to remember your message. And this told a story for me, this piece, visually and with the whole thread of the narrative. Yeah.
Yeah.
What'd you think?
I thought it was amazing. It's very obvious that the videographer, the producer, put a massive amount of time into this product. There are multiple missions here, multiple missions. It's obvious for me to tell that they were done in multiple missions. So the amount of time invested in producing this one piece is substantial. To get, I think this piece is about 4.5 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. To get 4.5 minutes fully produced is a tall order, and to do so in this environment takes a lot. It takes a lot to do this. So I appreciate the work that was done. The interview work was really, really good. Yeah. The fact that interview subjects were lit, their audio was spot on. One of the things that you notice is their angles change within their interviews. So they change angles. One is sitting in a helicopter and is facing to the right. The other is facing to the left with a flag off of his shoulder. So things like that create flow in a production. And you know, one of the things that I want to highlight, and it's the first time we've seen it today, is we saw our first environmental portraits of somebody just shooting environmental portrait video of somebody, because it brings so much of the human element. It draws an audience in to see that, and this had it in spades. I do think it was very special to close and to recognize the crew that was lost, Jolly 51, I believe, that they lost, and I think that just speaks volumes, and it's phenomenal that they were allowed to use this production to memorialize those folks and represent that. Yeah, Jolly 51. It is just it's special. So kudos to this. To the work.
Excellent. Well, we're going to go ahead and take a quick 15-minute break. Hopefully you'll be joining us back. We'll give you a chance to maybe get your bathroom break in or grab some coffee and continue watching. We'll see you in 15 minutes.